Hi, I'm Chris McCoy. Welcome to this edition of the Memphis Flyer Podcast. And I've got a special co-host today. This is Amy Schaftlein. She is from the Sonosphere Podcast because our cover story this week is about podcasters. Amy, thanks for joining us today.
I'm happy to be here.
So the podcasting is our cover story. We're also, we have Jackson Baker talking about the recent leadership changes in the state parties. We have Alex Green talking about Delta Stardust, which is Michael Graber's latest project. You know Michael, don't you?
Yes, yeah. He sent me some songs. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, longtime musician here in Memphis. I used to work with him at Memphis Pizza Cafe. That's,
I had some of that pizza recently. It's been a minute since I've been there.
Yeah. It hasn't changed.
It's the same, which is perfect.
Yeah, I mean, because they used to win our Best of Memphis Pizza all the time.
I know.
And then I watched, for my movie this week, I watched The Brutalist, which is a Best Picture nominee, starring Adrian Brody. And have you seen it yet?
I have not. I heard some controversy around the accent and the AI usage of his Hungarian.
Yeah, it's not really noticeable.
Okay.
And I think it was so to me, there's a difference between using generative AI stuff to take shortcuts or rather than, this is more like auto-tune. What they were doing.
Right.
They were massaging some of the Hungarian vowels.
Yeah.
So the performance is the performance of the artist and everything, but they just made it a little better. And I don't really see a big difference between doing that and all of the stuff that we go through for color correction, for example.
So that's what I heard too. And so it's like AI has just become this sort of thing that has a bad connotation to it, no matter how you say what context it's in.
Right. Yeah. And exactly. I mean, we use sound noise reduction, which is a type of machine learning. It's just become AI. It's been ruined to me. It's been ruined because of the it's become a brand name, hyped,
right.
And really it's a big stock bubble right now.
Exactly.
Well, that's a whole other conversation.
That's a whole other. We're not going to get into that today.
No. Well, believe me. Oh, I could yap at length about that. But The Brutalist, I really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful film. It was shot in VistaVision, which is a semi obsolete format that was made in the 50s. Actually, it's like 35 millimeter, not like a 70 millimeter. So it's wider than a square aspect ratio, but not widescreen.
Oh, okay.
And Star Wars, the original Star Wars was shot in VistaVision because it's really good for doing miniature work, landscapes and miniature work, because it's so detailed. And they certainly took advantage of a lot of that because they did not build these giant buildings in The Brutalist. They were all like miniatures. And
oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's old fashioned. They would build miniatures outside, so the sky behind it is real sky, so it looks like it's really up on this hill, but it's not. It's just this big.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's great. Adrian Brody's really good. And brutalism, what it
architecture?
is. The architecture. Yeah. That's what he is. He's a Hungarian Jewish refugee who lands in America with knowing nobody, except he's got a cousin in Philadelphia that he's trying to find, and then in the end he ends up this acclaimed, architect.
Yeah.
And changes the face of American architecture and stuff. And Guy Pearce is in it too. And he's amazing. Oh, why doesn't Guy Pearce get more work? He was so good. But I recommend it. Yeah, what I said in my review too is that it's 3.5 hours long.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Take some time off.
Yeah. And there's an intermission, which I am all for. An intermission would have made Avengers Endgame so much better.
Huh.
Just for example.
They used to do that back in the old days, didn't they? Do intermissions during the theaters and the movies?
Yeah. Lawrence of Arabia has an intermission. 2001: A Space Odyssey has an intermission. Yeah, but they should do that again because
bring the intermission back is what Chris said.
That's what I'm saying. Bring it back. And the theaters should want to do it because we went and got a whole second round of concessions.
Yeah, exactly.
If
it's over 3 hours, you have to have an intermission.
I think so.
Okay, that's what we've decided.
I think so, for sure. I'm also of the opinion that it's like if it's over 3 hours these days, like sell it as a series.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
but not for this one. This
Okay.
one it worked. I mean, it's a great film. He does not nail the landing. If it had been only as long as the first intermission, it would be like a perfect film.
Mm,
But it kind of falls apart at the end.
okay.
And but I didn't feel like my time was wasted, and I think that's number one when I'm
Yeah.
reviewing stuff. Like, are you wasting my time here? And it worked in the room great, except everybody was walking out like, what was that ending? Kind of. But I really enjoyed it, and I recommend it if it sounds like it's your thing. If you want to see it before the Oscars, for sure, because I think it's expanding this week
Okay.
into more theaters too. So, Brutalist, it gets the dreaded mixed positive, but it's a high mixed positive, you know. But we are here today to talk about podcasting because that's what we're doing.
That's what we're doing right now.
We're literally doing it right now. And Amy, I feel like you were one of the pioneers of the forum in this city. Yeah, because Sonosphere, because we did a podcast story in the Flyer many years ago.
2017.
27, and you were one of them.
Yeah.
Then too. What got you into it in the first place?
Well, honestly, I always, and I think I've even said this in the article, I always, like, growing up, wanted to curate music. I wasn't like a great musician. I took some, piano classes and all that stuff, but I still loved music, but I was kind of more of the curator type. And I listened to the radio and I loved the radio. I was one of those kids that made the mixtapes by recording the radio. So that was always something that I really loved to do. So I wanted a radio show, really. And I applied to WEVL at the time. And while I was waiting on that, my friend Chris and I were like, you know what? There's this thing that people are doing now called podcasting. We can do it ourselves. And this was back in like 2015, 2016. And so we kind of started doing that. And that's how it began, really.
Right. I think like it's a low barrier to entry
Yeah.
form. And you can get really creative with it, and it sort of fills a niche that is not filled by lots of other kinds of media. I mean, maybe like NPR is probably the closest thing to it beyond that. But and because it's such a low barrier to entry, you get like a huge like variety of voices in the. Do you listen to a lot of podcasts?
I do, yeah. I mean, I think I listened to more back then than I do now. I've kind of started, and I guess that's kind of where the podcasting thing is going. A lot of consolidation is happening. You have like a few really big podcast names these days, and but there's still so much out there that it's like an endless, number of people. But I feel like, audio medium is so personal. Because you're putting in your headphones and that person is like in your head, literally. So you really start to kind of get to know these radio personalities and the podcasters. So that's why I feel like people really it's blown up as a medium, because it's just something that is, you just take with you. It's very personal to me.
Yeah. So you get this like sort of parasocial relationship with your podcasters.
Yeah. Well, and I think that was the case even in like radio back in the day.
I mean, totally.
And especially in, rural areas, like, the radio, your personalities, that was, your buddy,
Minnie Pearl. That's why Minnie Pearl was famous.
Exactly. So,
just for also, I don't know, Edward R. Murrow.
You could probably name a lot of folks, but yeah, like that's, and so I always wanted to be, in the radio, in the studio, and I love that. And so now, after moving Sonosphere into WYXR, it's been sort of like both of my wants together. So that's been really fun. Yeah.
But though, we haven't told the folks what Sonosphere is.
That's
What's
true.
it about? What's your podcast about, Amy?
So, it started as sort of a research experiment around modern classical music. I think we were really interested, me and my podcast partner at the time, Chris Williams, we were interested in noise music. We liked listening to Wolf Eyes, Black Dice, a lot of other kind of interesting and not really, commercial music. And so we're like,
to say the least.
Where did we find this? Why does this exist? Why aren't more people listening to this? Because it hurts your ears, but so like why, and so we kind of went way back in the archives of Schoenberg and Messiaen and Stockhausen and kind of the European, and then went into some of the composers from America too. And then, after going through all of that, we were like, well, this is just interesting and kind of longer form. So we started doing shorter kind of 30-minute interviews with local folks too. It was very worldly to start, and then we kind of started drawing it back into the local music scene, because there's a lot going on here too behind the scenes that people weren't, knowing as much about. I mean, Memphis is known for blues and hip hop, but there's a lot of cool punk, and now there's some noise and electronic music, and so it's important to lift those voices too.
Yes, there is the Memphis Concrete. I think they just released their new lineup.
Yep, they're in June.
In June. And I went last year, Memphis Concrete, and I just had the best time.
Yeah. That was one of the first things that Sonosphere covered. They began back in, I think their first one was 2018.
Yeah.
And we covered that. It was very, very small in the old Crosstown Arts building on Cleveland. And it was really cool. And they brought regional artists, electronic and noise artists from the region. And so it was cool.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of folks in that vein right now who are working in Memphis, and I feel like that especially the Memphis Concrete, like their festival setting is really good way to experience all that, because you get like a sampler.
Yeah, the ambient and the noisy stuff, and sort of the more pop, weird pop. Yeah,
the weird pop that's like integrating some of that stuff in there. So, we're a fairly fresh podcast here. We've only been doing it for a few months. What advice would you have for us?
Oh, man, I don't know if I have any. I don't know.
We're asking the hard-hitting questions here on the podcast.
One of the things, I think like this, I like that you're filming it. I mean, I think that's pretty neat, because you can kind of connect in a different way. One of the things we did was we started a sound observations where we took our podcast live. And we kind of showcased some of the artists we were talking about in our podcast live to an audience. And so I think that's really cool. And if y'all can ever do anything like that, it kind of, it creates another sort of experience with the podcast.
Yeah. It's interesting because I'm on another podcast. I'm on Astronomica. We do live play or, actual play podcasts like, what is it? See, I've challenged myself and failed here. Critical Role.
Okay.
We do it like that, only it's like in space.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah, but we have a lot of listeners, but they're really spread out. Like we had I just got on this podcast like 2 years ago. I would say that they had a start, and they started off and they built this audience, and then one of the dudes left because he moved out of town, and I got in. So I'm the dude. I'm like Conan O'Brien in The Simpsons, when Conan O'Brien left, and they got the new generation of people to be like, okay, now we have to write in this idiom that they created. I feel like that's me.
Okay.
But I think the thing that surprised me the most about it at that point was that the huge reach of it, and we had a Astronomicon, where we got a bunch of people together, and Shelby Forrest at the in camp up there, and just played games for 3 days. We had people come from Norway and Italy.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
It is kind of wild. And that's another thing that's cool about radio and podcasting, is that, it streams all over the world. And we actually, Sonosphere got a call from an Austrian classical festival. And they wanted to air one of our podcasts that we did on Messiaen. So it was like, oh, okay, well, sure. I don't know who y'all are, but why not? And I was, so it's surprising that you can get listeners from all over the world.
Yeah, the reach, I think. And so it's low barrier to entry, huge potential reach.
Yeah. But it's very hard to monetize.
Yeah.
And that's what I was getting to earlier. I think there's a lot of consolidation and big names in it now, and it's kind of hard to break through if you want to make it a day job, which you can. But it's a harder thing to do. But
it's harder now.
Yeah, harder now. But if for a hobby, it's really fun and low barrier, for sure.
So what's your day job?
Oh, well, I run a nonprofit called United Housing.
Mm-hmm.
We provide home buyer education, financial literacy education, and then we also build houses. So we're building 20 single-family homes for low to moderate income families to buy. So owning their first home, that's really about creating generational wealth through homeownership.
Yeah. And so, wouldn't you tell me you were experimenting with a 3D printed house?
Yeah, we've been looking into it. So we researched this company out of Austin, Texas called Icon. That right now they're working on lunar construction and kind of coming up with some concrete mixes that are more carbon friendly. And so we're looking at bringing them here. Nothing is certain or confirmed, but we are doing some research into 3D printing and seeing how it could alleviate some of the pressures on the lack of inventory of affordable homes here.
Yeah, because that's a big problem here. That
Quality homes.
Quality
Yeah.
homes, right? Because the rents have been going up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have a very seriously aging
Housing stock,
housing
for sure.
stock.
Mhm.
Seriously, as someone who lives in a very seriously aging house, we have seriously aging housing stock here.
Yeah. So I think that's important because we also help elderly repair their homes too, and so it's important to protect that investment because it's one of the biggest investments many Americans make, and we want to see that investment being passed down better to create the wealth it's supposed to for families. So yeah.
And also, create an affordable option
Right.
too, because
To
it's
get to barrier to entry. Yeah.
so huge barrier. We're all about the barriers to entry.
I know
today.
that's the theme today.
Well, so pick up your Memphis Flyer. There's Amy and Sonosphere and a lot of other folks on the cover in the cover story, and we always encourage you to get the physical paper. We love those physical copies, don't we?
Oh yeah. I always pick one up when I see it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's like, to me personally, it's like I'm not staring at my phone for the 10 or 15 minutes that it takes to go through.
I
this,
know. Ugh.
You know. So and yes, be sure, where can they find Sonosphere?
Yeah, check it out. It's at sonospherepodcast.com, and we post there. We also are on WYXR Mondays from 4 to 5 p.m. And Jenny Davis is my new podcast co-host.
I was about to ask. Yes.
Yeah. So Jenny, she many of y'all know her. She was a flutist in the symphony and now runs the Youth Symphony Orchestra. And joined me. She helped us a lot when she was at Crosstown Arts, put together some of our performances that we brought to town. So she's always been a friend of the pod, and so now she's a co-host.
And she's a great musician and a great flautist.
Yes, absolutely.
But I saw her do. I think you were there. Saw her do 433.
Oh yeah.
With I Make Mad Beats.
Yeah, that was great.
Oh my God, it was. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it is the John Cage, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a John Cage composition, and it's basically just it instructs the players to sit silently at their instruments for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and the ambient sound in the room becomes the music.
Right.
And yeah, they did that, and it was hilarious because I think half of the people there didn't know what was happening.
Yeah.
And Jenny would like take her flute and be like,
right.
Not.
And hold that.
And everybody was like, are they going to do something? Are they going to do something? And finally, Mad was like, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. It was good. That was Continuum Fest, which Sonosphere was a part of too. So,
I remember that.
yeah.
I remember that. Oh my God, that was so great.
Yeah.
Anyways, we could yap all day. We're going to let you go. Memphis Flyer Podcast. We'll see you next week.